Hey guys and gals, we're live on Boomer TV. Now, growing up in Los Angeles, where my dad, he also grew up, I remember hearing about its strange criminal history. It's been fascinating. When I was away to college, one of the most bizarre of all was unfolding then. Hi, I'm Andy Asher. I'm editor over here at bloomerboomer.com, and today on our show is American-based foreign correspondent. His name is Ivor Davis, who delivered one of the most gripping I-was-there type eyewitness accounts of the inside story about the notorious murder spree of the 20th century in Manson Exposed, a reporter's 50-year journey into madness and murder. He is also featured in a docuseries, Helter Skelter, an American Myth, which is airing now on Epix TV on the channel there. Now, Mr. Davis is the brutally honest guide to this true crime horror story, and will also feature another of his first-hand accounts, The Beatles and Me on Tour. Over the next 4 weeks now, at the same time, Ira and I will be talking live about this fascinating series of stories. But first, if you are new, you can learn about our upcoming shows in our newsletter, or you can connect with us on Facebook and YouTube, Twitter and Twitch. It's for gamers, but I also stream there, as well as right on our website, bloomerboomer.com, where we live stream all our shows. And by the way, I was agreed to take some of your questions live. If you have anything, you can do it on your social media platform you're on right now, or go to bloomerboomer.com. And also like us and follow us on your favorite social media to hear more about what's coming up. And in the meantime, we're going to get started with Ivor Davis, author of Manson Exposed, a reporter's 50-year journey into madness and murder, and another book, Beatles and Me on Tour. But first, remember, I do love marmalade. Well, Ivor, it is such a thrill having you here. What a fascinating story, and it's great to talk about it. It's great to be talking about it with you.
Thank you for having me on, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. I hope you can hear me. I'm not echoing too badly, am I?
No, I think you're coming over loud and clear. Now, I know we just marked the 50th anniversary of the infamous Manson Murders. It almost felt like one of those, seminal events when suddenly many people like me, we realize that the boogeyman really exists, and terrible fear creeps in, realizing, we're not safe anymore. It seemed like, that's the way it felt. To a guy who's, in the late teens. Now, it still gives me chills, and I know it's not a story that's easy to retell, but for people who maybe don't remember the many details, can you give us maybe the Cliff Notes abridged version of it all?
Yeah, well, what happened on August the 9th, 1969, was that I was called to a house off the Benedict Canyon area of Beverly Hills. And then I was told, as it slowly unfolded, that there were 5 dead people in this mansion. And of course, the most dramatically awful murder was to Sharon Tate, a beautiful actress, married to Roman Polanski, the famous film director. And the awful thing was that Sharon was 8 months pregnant. And with her in the house was a veritable pile-up of corpses. Jay Sebring, a friend of Sharon, a famous hairdresser to the movie stars, Steve McQueen, people like that, and Paul Newman, he was dead. Wojciech Frykowski, a friend of Roman Polanski, a Polish wannabe film actor-writer, and Frykowski's girlfriend, Abigail Folger, who was the heiress to the Folger coffee fortune. And in a car in the driveway there was Stephen Perry, who had nothing to do with that group I just described, but was in the wrong place at the wrong time, visiting somebody who was living in the guest house on the property. But I'll tell you this, we did not know, and I was stuck around for several hours, for 2 or 3 or 4 hours, who the murder victims were. I just add one footnote. I was very lucky. I happened to know and had played soccer in Los Angeles with a guy called Philip Freed, and he lived 3 doors away. And he had a phone in his house. And that was the days when we didn't have cell phones. So I walked over to Phil's house, used his phone, and said, "Who lives there?" And he told me, and that was a big shock. And then a few hours later, it was confirmed who the dead people were. And then, 24 hours later, Lino and Rosemary LaBianca, a couple who lived in a very nice home 15 miles from Beverly Hills, were found murdered in similar fashion. But the cops never put the two together. They said it was a copycat murder. It wasn't. It turned out, of course, as the world knows, to be the murder at the hands of Charles Manson and his demented followers who were very much under drugs. So we didn't know that at the time, but that's the basic story. The cops were puzzled. Neighbors in the West LA, Beverly Hills area were terrified.
Now, what constantly keeps me reminded of all this is, and I assume some of his followers are still alive. You can on that, but I know, I know he died a few years ago. Manson did, but are most still in prison, or is some set free by now?
Here's the situation. As you said, Manson died about 3 years ago. 4 years ago, one of the key killers, Susan Atkins, died in jail, and there are still those who were convicted of the crimes, including Charles Tex Watson, he's in jail, Leslie Van Houten, she's in jail, and Patricia Krenwinkel, she's in jail, and every 4 years they come up for parole. The parole board in the last 10 years has said, yes, give them parole. But the governor of California said, no way. And so they are still in prison, and they'll probably remain there for the rest of their lives.
Oh, okay. So they're, yeah, like I say, every time they come up for parole, the journal, we cover it, the journalists cover it. I'm glad they do. And then there's Squeaky Fromm.
Yes, well, Squeaky Fromm.
Okay.
I should clarify, if I may, if I may do that, Andy.
Yeah.
Squeaky Fromm, she calls herself Frommy, but everybody calls her Fromm. She lives in upstate New York. She's sort of rather a quiet life. She was not involved in the actual killings that I just described. However, several years later, she became a front page topic because she went in Sacramento. She pulled a gun out and was arrested, and she pulled a gun out and tried to shoot President Gerald Ford. However, it never happened. The Secret Service jumped on her. She was put in jail for that. And then about 20 odd years later, she was paroled. So she is out, believe it or not, for trying to kill the president. She claimed it had nothing to do with Manson. She claimed she was trying to bring attention to the environment, clean air, clean everything else. But she was also, I must say, and if she's listening, I'm sorry about this, but you were pretty demented, Squeaky, because not only did you do what you did, but you also threatened to kill me. But that's another story.
Yeah, that was my. Well, listen, I'm glad we have a few weeks to cover some of these details because, and I know as a journalist, you covered some really amazing historical events that are still current today. Another one that is still unfolding, I remember during my junior year, I was fifth period math class, when all the girls who were kind of overall pretty blasé about most things, but they were just going crazy over a group that I had never heard named the Beatles. That was an amazing story. Tell us a little bit about that.
Let's see, the Beatles. Let me just think a second. Oh, yes, Andy, thank you. Yes,
right.
I'm glad you jogged my memory. Yes, the answer, of course. I was very fortunate as a journalist and a foreign correspondent for the London Daily Express, based on the West Coast, based in LA, to be called one August day, 1964, and my editor said, "Get on the plane to San Francisco, the boys are arriving." I thought, who are the boys? The Beatles, of course, silly. I didn't know that. But don't forget, back in 64, the communications weren't as dazzling as they are today. And so we didn't have the internet. And I knew about the Beatles because in February 1964, I had tuned in America to a show called The Ed Sullivan Show. And Ed Sullivan had the only big variety show in America. And he had the Beatles on. And the Beatles were a sensation. So much so that I think 74 million people tuned into that. And as soon as the Beatles manager, Brian Epstein, saw that, he said, we're going to take the boys to America to try and conquer America. And of course, he did in August. And I was fortunate enough to join the Beatles in San Francisco on day one. And part of my assignment was to cover everything they did and also write a column for one of their group, a guy by the name of George Harrison. And that was my ticket to ride with the Beatles. And believe me, it was amazing.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, were you an entertainment or just what kind of stuff did you write? Were you an entertainment reporter primarily?
Well, I was a West Coast correspondent, and so I would handle riots. I covered the Watts riots of Los Angeles of 1965. I also covered divorces of people like Marlon Brando and Cary Grant and any big British stars that were in Hollywood. And if you're in Hollywood, you end up doing a lot of showbiz stuff.
Sure.
And if you're writing for a sort of a newspaper that is interested in the lives of the movie stars, you do a lot of that stuff. I mean, I remember spending some time at the Cedars Sinai Hospital. It was called Cedars of Lebanon, because poor Peter Sellers, the great comedian, the great actor, was in hospital with a heart attack. So I covered everything, riots to entertainment to rock and roll.
So your British audience was certainly interested in Peter Sellers, and they wanted to follow that.
They were, and today anybody that you know, and I'm sure you know, of course, you know Peter Sellers. The guy was a genius. I just watched a movie called Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, by the great film director Stanley Kramer. And in that film, Sellers plays an Englishman. He plays the American president. And he plays a kind of a Werner von Braun, crazy ex-Nazi scientist. He's a talented guy, and so he was talented then, and unfortunately he died too young, but that's another story, as many of the great talents in the world did die too young or were killed, like John Lennon.
Yeah. Hey, Ivor, could you hang on for just a couple of minutes and take a few questions and frequently asked questions?
Of course.
Okay, one moment.
Of course.
Here with Ivor Davis, and fascinating stories that we've been talking about, and he's agreed to take a couple of your questions. And there's one I have here, more current modern day type of a question. This was about the movie. Let's see how. Well, okay, I know this was about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. They were talking. That was kind of. I mean, it was a story that they were very creative with that had an unexpected ending, right?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And sorry, would you like me to explain or?
Yeah. I think that I don't know if you, being a journalist who covered it as closely as you did, really enjoyed it, but I thought it was really good. But go ahead and talk about that.
Yes. Well, I must say, I thought Quentin Tarantino, the film director's film, was quite brilliant because he captured the 60s exactly the way I remember it. And so much so that it was eerie. But don't forget, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's a fairy tale. A fairy tale there, Andy. So I should tell you that what knocked me out was the scenes that Quentin Tarantino had with, I think it was Brad Pitt, who went to the Spahn Movie Lodge. And the Spahn Movie Lodge was where Manson and his gang lived. And I want to tell you this, that he recreated the ranch. It was eerie, it was scary. The young women, the young girls, and I saw them because I went there. It was beautifully captured. It was like Village of the Damned Children. So that was quite spectacular. He did a great job with that.
Yeah. The other question I have here is, and I'm not all that up on this one. So there is something, some connection with the Beatles didn't make them do it. Can you kind of
Yes.
tie the loose ends
Well,
on that one?
yes. Well, here's the thing. Um, Very simply, it's this: that when I went to the Spahn movie ranch after Charles Manson was arrested and spoke to the Manson family members, I was stunned. I was absolutely in disbelief, because those who were there and not involved in the murders told me that Charles Manson used the Beatles' music from the White Album, songs like Helter Skelter, Revolution, Piggies. Charles Manson made his followers believe that the Beatles were sending him secret messages in the lyrics of those songs, in which they were warning Charlie Manson that was going to be a black-white revolution. And Manson, in his wisdom, was going to escape to the desert in California, Central California, and hide out until the revolution was over. He was going to hide out in an underground city. So, in a way, it was, I mean, when I heard that, I thought, what a load of old rubbish, because I knew the Beatles lyrics. And then, in July of 1970, I sat in the courtroom and I saw and heard Vincent Bugliosi, the chief DA prosecutor, tell the jury that the Beatles' music was the reason why Manson sent his gang out to kill. And that's why the Beatles made me do it was the most stupid, unbelievable, astonishing thesis that was presented to the jury. And you know what happened, Andy, of course? The jury swallowed it, and the jury convicted Manson and the gang of first-degree murder based on that Beatles premise.
Oh gosh. Let me just get this one in. I know that we're running a little long here, but I guess we just talked about this, but has anybody been able to determine what Manson's motives were?
Well, I'll try and capsulize it in 1 minute.
Uh-huh.
I don't believe he thought there was going to be a black-white revolution, but I'll tell you what my opinion is from day one. It was this: a friend of Manson, under Manson's command, had murdered a musician a week before the Sharon Tate murders, a musician named Gary Hinman. Murdered him because Manson told him to. And this guy called Bobby Beausoleil was arrested within 24 hours in the murdered man's car. He went to jail and he never blew the whistle on Manson. It is my opinion that Manson set up these two horrendous murders to try and put the cops off of the trail of Bobby Beausoleil. And the reasoning went in Manson's warped mind: if I set up a couple of murders that look exactly like the Gary Hinman murders, the police are going to say, oh my God, the same killers are still loose. Mr. Beausoleil, who is our chief suspect in the Gary Hinman case, could not have done it. He was in jail, so we're going to cut him loose. Well, I mean, that was ridiculous. But I think that Manson did it to put the cops off the trail of Bobby Beausoleil. That's my thinking about it, and I believe it. And I heard about that in 1969, and I believe that was the real motive.
Gosh. Well, this is fascinating. Again, we're going to talk to you a few more times in the next few weeks. We'll be right back, and just for people to let people know where they can find out more about you and your books, just one moment here. Back with Ivor Davis, the author, and Ivor, thanks again for all the time you've spent with us. And for people that want to get to know a little bit more about you, the books and all that, could you tell us about that?
Yes, if you go to www.ivordavisbooks.com, you can find more than you ever wanted to know about me. But above all, you can actually order my book. Either the paperback book of the Manson book has just come out, and also my book has come out in audio book. So you can be jogging up the hills and the beaches or wherever you jog in this crazy era we're living in, and you can hear my book as well as read it. So www.ivordavisbooks.com. Thank you.
Ivor, thank you so much, and I invite you to follow us, our viewers and listeners, and also be here for the next 3 Fridays at the same time, and we will get into a little bit more detail about the 2 books, Manson Exposed, a reporter's 50-year journey into madness, and the murder of Manson Exposed and the Beatles' 1964 record-breaking pandemonium-inducing tour of America. And you can also find out more on Facebook and YouTube and at bloomerboomer.com. So if you like this, please like us on Facebook and follow us. In the meantime, hey, remember, I love marmalade.